Everybody, this is the President of the United States lying to you. Let's listen to him lie.
Politician I know, but I'm listening to the scientists. Wear a mask, socially distance. If the unvaccinated...
He said, I'm listening to every scientist I know. Wear a mask, socially distance. Both of those things have no science behind them. So, and then he went on to say, let's listen to it again.
Politician I know, but I'm listening to the scientists. Wear a mask, socially distance. If the unvaccinated get vaccinated, they will protect themselves and other unvaccinated people around them. If they do not, states with low vaccination rates may see those rates go up.
So, again, nobody's ever had to pay a price for those lies. No one's ever had to even answer for them. No one will even ask a question. But Rand Paul is doing something about it. Rand Paul says Fauci's consequence should be jail. So here, let's listen to him. He went on with Laura Ingraham, and here's what he had to say.
Everything they blamed the right on, vaccine hesitancy, not trusting government officials, the loss of trust in government, I told them over and over again, and I still continue to tell them, it is at their feet. It's not at those of us who said, well, maybe we should examine individually whether older people might benefit from the vaccine versus younger people who might not need it, or whether or not people who've already been infected may not need to be vaccinated again, or maybe people don't need 3 or 4 vaccines if they've already been infected. None of these questions were ever answered. But the more they came out with things that weren't believable, like that your 6-month-old needs 3 vaccines or your 12-year-old needs 3 vaccines, even if they've had COVID, and that none of the studies included the variable of whether you have had COVID. So they would do these large studies and compare booster to no booster, and they couldn't show that it stopped transmission because it doesn't. And for kids and teenagers and young people, they couldn't show that it reduced hospitalization or death because it didn't, because these kids were rarely going to the hospital. So then they came up with, they said, well, if we vaccinate your kid 3 times, they make antibodies.
But Rand,
I mean,
yeah.
it wasn't
Senator,
proof of anything.
It was all, yeah, Senator, they were lying. And the lying had real consequences for children, their mental health, their education, for business, for our faith, not being able to go to houses of worship. I mean, that's fundamental American freedoms. And I'll ask you again, what should the consequences be for Anthony Fauci?
Jail. You know, I've sent 2 referrals to the Department of Justice. I think he lied to Congress, which is a felony. You know, several folks from the Trump administration were accused of lying to Congress and carted off to jail with FBI agents all over their property, yanking them out of their house early in the morning. But we have 2 tiers of justice here. It depends on whether you were a supporter of Donald Trump or you're a supporter of big government, the centralized government. But Anthony Fauci did lie to Congress. We know that from his own words, not because I say lies, but his private emails say he was lying. Virtually everything he said in private contradicted what he was saying in public. And he was fairly honest in private. In private, he said masks don't work. In public, he wore 3 masks. In private, he admitted that there was such a thing as natural immunity gained from getting the infection. In public, he was like, we're not going to measure that. It's unpredictable.
Yeah, on our show, he said that several times. So I kept trying to push him on natural immunity, and he's oh, well, no, we're not.
So there is Rand Paul, and, I don't line up with Rand Paul on many things, but I certainly line up with him on this, and he's one of the only guys in the whole country with any kind of platform or power who will try to tell you the truth about Anthony Fauci, that he's a pathological liar, and I caught him lying to Congress at least twice. He said he didn't fund the gain-of-function research, which was a lie. And the NIH even came out and contradicted him and said, no, they were funding it. And of course they were funding it. They're the Eco Health Alliance. And I just want to let you know about when you see...
I think they blamed the right on vaccine hesitancy.
Let me show you this picture of Dr. Fauci. You can turn it down. So this picture of him, remember, he was wearing a mask and 2 masks. I think he's wearing 2 masks there. If you read his private emails, he tells you masks don't work. If you watch him before COVID, when people would ask him about masking for a flu virus, or he would say no, it actually has more negative consequences because you're fidgeting, you're touching it with your finger, you're getting schmutz everywhere, plus you're breathing in your own. These are his words. And the only guy who wants to hold anybody accountable with any power seems to be Rand Paul and Ron Johnson.
Yep.
And you're supposed to not like those people. That's what they tell you. You're not supposed to not like them. I mean, you saw Stephen Colbert when Jon Stewart came on Stephen Colbert's show 2 years ago and told you that the virus came from the Wuhan lab. Stephen Colbert's retort was, how long have you been working for Senator Ron Johnson? And so that's just their way that's the establishment's way to discredit you. So, Dr. Kory, what would you have to say about this?
I mean, what can I say about Fauci at this point? I mean, I've written multiple op-eds pointing out demonstrably that, like you said, that you've pointed out the lies. You can see them, but you know, what I was watching before with Rand Paul. I mean, he literally has the evidence. Not only was Fauci involved, knew about the gain of function. He was involved. He knew very full well all of his closest colleagues from around the world. And this is bioweapons research. That's the other thing, Jimmy. I don't like the word gain of function. Gain of function is almost like it's a misnomer. It misrepresents what's going on. The only reason why you would do gain of function is to study bioweapons and responses to them. And they were doing bioweapons research, which was supposedly outlawed, and they offshored it to China. Fauci knew this. And then, of course, you know that through FOIA emails, what's the first thing they did when they found out there was a leak and people were getting sick? Fauci's, organizing his buddies to write a paper in Nature, completely dismissing this idea that it was from a lab. And of course, it's, a zoonotic virus that jumped to humans. I mean, absolutely absurd. I mean, that's the greatest thing. You mentioned Jon Stewart. I mean, for me, I didn't pay attention to this lab leak theory. I was too busy saving lives. But when I started to look at it, I actually, what popped up in my mind is same thing as Jon Stewart said on, I can't remember what show, but when I discovered that this wet market that they were blaming everything on with the pangolins, the wet market is 300 yards from the lab doing coronavirus bioweapons research. When I heard that, I was like, no kidding, really? It's just absurd. It's comical.
The Wuhan virus. It says it on the building, the Wuhan lab for viral. It says it right there. It's right down the street from this wet market. Oh, that's what happened. It was a pangolin. Okay. Yeah. But what I tell people is that Dr. Fauci, in order for Dr. Fauci to be held accountable, you need someone inside a government to hold him accountable. Somebody from the Justice Department, somebody from a law enforcement agency somewhere. But because he lied, when you lie at the behest of the establishment, which is what he did. By the way, he was the head of the bioweapons program for the Pentagon, right? So that's why when you say it's a bioweapon, it rings true to a lot of people, because that's why he was the highest paid person in government. And it was after 9/11, they put him in charge of the bioweapons. So he became the highest paid person in federal government. Plus, we never can find out how much money he's actually taken from Big Pharma, because Big Pharma gave tens of millions of dollars to employees who work at the NIH and inside of government, and that doesn't get talked about, because you'd have to be talked about in corporate media that's funded by Big Pharma, and so that's why it's never talked about, right?
Jimmy, can I ask you a question on that? Because every time this subject comes up, I literally just shake my head in disbelief. Like, you have a governmental agency, right, which is purportedly for the people,
right?
And this agency somehow has legislation and policies which allows it to receive royalties from the industry they're regulating, purportedly, and funding, and they don't have to disclose them. Maybe it's just not coming to you, but is there any other governmental agency that has a similar deal? That, let's say Department of the Interior, the Environment, that regulates, polluters, agriculture, nutrition. Did any of those get like patent royalties from like food additives or something? Like, how can this be possible?
That's just because they own when they were allowed to advertise on television. Talk about Big Pharma, and that happened under Bill Clinton. The game was over. That was it. They bought the media, and the media got consolidated. There used to be 50 giant media companies. Now there's only 6. Every TV show, every radio show, every magazine, every newspaper is produced by one of the same 6 companies. And so they got them. And that's that. So that was the end of it. They used to, you could go back and find 60 Minutes episodes where they would investigate vaccines. And they would actually, but that hasn't happened since Bill Clinton.
Actually, Jimmy, I disagree with you as the reason. I think the reason why our governmental agency has a policy where they don't have to disclose their royalties is because Congress is bought.
Oh,
right?
Of course.
And the politicians who could write this legislation and actually mandate that they reveal this,
right?
The pharmaceutical industry lobbying budget is in 2021 was $660,000 per member of Congress, which is the highest lobby budget, and it's 2 to 3 times coal and gas. We do live in the United States of pharma, and that's why we literally have an agency where scientists working there for the government are getting royalties from the products.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like how they're allowed to do insider trading, and that we're ruled by crap. I mean, people don't realize in America that they're the most propagandized people maybe in the whole world, including China, because people in China know they're getting propaganda. In America, they think they're getting the real news. And our government's 100% corrupted, right? And I don't mean little corruption, like, Joe Biden got his kid a no-show job on an energy board, or Donald Trump set his kid up with a deal with the Saudis. I'm talking about everything that happens. It gets greased by corruption, or it doesn't happen. And if anything good ever happens to this government, it's an accident, or it's a bribe to get you to vote. Right now, Joe Biden and the Democrats are now pushing student loan relief again. Why? Because they want to bribe you into voting for them, as he's funding a genocide in Palestine, right? So they have to think of something. And that's what they're trying right now. I don't think it's going to work. But yes, we're the most propagandized people in the world. People don't know it. And our government's 100% corrupted. It's not a little corrupted.
Jimmy, I love that point you bring up with the contrasting China and the U.S., because that's something I learned. By the way, I did not know how much propaganda, how controlled the media was before COVID. That's all been exposed to me recently. But, a friend of mine who grew up in Germany, he told me like he had some East German family and they had West German family. He said, like in East Germany, they didn't believe anything.
Right.
Said. Like they knew it was all lies. Here, we swallow them up and cheer them on.
That's right.
You're right. It's worse here. It's worse here.
It's way worse.
People are unaware the only way you can fight propaganda is by not believing it, and that's not what happens here.
People think that guys like Sean Hannity and Anderson Cooper, Rachel Maddow, who are being funded by weapons manufacturers and big pharma and oil companies and banks, are somehow going to tell you the truth about all those things. And of course they're not. They really, honestly, it blows my mind. But anyway, Dr. Kory, I really appreciate you coming on. Everybody should check out his book, The War on Ivermectin, the medicine that saved millions and could have ended the pandemic. And check him out at his Substack, Pierre Kory Medical Musings.com. I appreciate you coming on today. Thanks for your time. It's always good to talk to you.
Always great to talk to you. I'll see you next time, Jimmy.
Okay, see you next time. Come see us on tour. We're going to be in Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania, Cortland, New York, Oakmont, Pennsylvania, El Paso, Texas, San Antonio, Texas, Vancouver, British Columbia. First show sold out. Denver, Colorado, Ashland, Virginia, Athens, Georgia, and Minneapolis. We're coming back to Minneapolis. If you couldn't get tickets last time, there'll be some available this time. We're doing 2 shows. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for all those tickets.